Nobody saw the Ottawa Senators coming in 2017. After years struggling to compete when it mattered most, the Sens caught fire and marched straight to the Eastern Conference Finals, pushing the defending champs to their limit. This team started with their captain, two-time Norris Trophy winner Erik Karlsson. The offensive-minded defenseman and face of the franchise dominated with speed, smarts, and otherworldly passing. Marc Methot, his blue line partner of 5 years, helped pick up some of the defensive slack, while Dion Phaneuf further anchored the back end and offered another veteran presence in the locker room since coming over from Toronto. If those guys in front of Craig Anderson slipped, Ottawa's netminder had their back. Despite missing time while his wife battled cancer, Anderson delivered a career year. While Ottawa wasn't necessarily known for its offense, the homegrown talent of Mike Hoffman and Mark Stone offered plenty of spark from the wing. Ottawa's 1C, Kyle Turris, had the best goal-scoring season of his career. That 16-17 season saw some new faces behind the bench. Head coach Guy Boucher brought his defensive prowess to Ottawa, and at his side stood Mark Crawford, best known for leading that Avalanche juggernaut in the 90s. A powerhouse by no means, this team just found ways to win. Bobby Ryan turned into Mr. Clutch, tallying more points in the playoffs than any Sen but Karlsson. Derek Brassard hadn't been the scoring threat Ottawa thought they traded for, but he too came alive in the postseason, specifically in their opening series against Boston. From there, they got past the Rangers in 6 to set up what became a back-and-forth showdown with Pittsburgh. In his first full season as general manager, Pierre Dorion watched a team he'd helped find the final pieces for force a Game 7. And as the Senators fought back, pushing the Penguins to overtime, owner Eugene Melnyk stood one goal away from competing for the Stanley Cup that had thus far eluded this franchise. This team got so close, but Ottawa's foundation needed repairs, and regardless of results on the ice, the cracks only looked to grow. Craig Anderson called this goal lucky. He never saw the knuckler from Chris Kunitz, which ended the Senators' magical ride, 5 minutes into overtime number 2. After fighting back to get one goal away from the Stanley Cup final, Ottawa couldn't come back from this one. Anderson had kept them in it that night, but the offense hit a wall. Health played a huge part of their struggles. Karlsson spent much of the playoffs on just one leg. Brassard fought through a torn labrum, and an offense already prone to vanishing fell apart. Now, nobody was picking this team to win the Cup. They needed a lot of luck to get where they did, and frankly overachieved to do so. That said, on paper, there was plenty of reason to believe this team could build upon the success that they did have, and be hopeful for the future. The Senators' core remained under contract, and while Karlsson and Brassard needed off-season surgeries, both expected to be back near the start of the regular season. Ottawa had built a close-knit locker room that battled for each other, and could build upon a year that no one saw coming. Now, one key caveat for whatever the future had in store for this team is that the Ottawa Senators, like every professional sports team, are a business. That's notable because this business belonged to the hands-on, tyrannical Eugene Melnyk. Melnyk was a billionaire who made his fortune in the pharmaceutical industry. A massive hockey fan, when the Senators faced bankruptcy in 2003 and Melnyk had the money to buy them, he did. The owner ensured that the team spent close to the salary cap, and in his first decade, that spending nearly paid off. But the success came in spite of near constant instability within the organization. The head coach's office needed a revolving door. Front office positions seemed to be on perpetual hot seats. Melnyk, when not watching from his primary mansion in Barbados, would give nonsensical locker room speeches where allegedly he'd drunkenly dream up rings the size of animals that the players would receive upon winning the Stanley Cup. Even while the Senators' magical 2016-17 season came together, the executive drama spilled out into public view. Frankly, it was a bloodbath drawn by Melnyk. These moves had become more frequent since the late Brian Murray stepped down from his general manager role in 2016. Murray, beloved in Ottawa, had provided some degree of a buffer between owner and organization, in addition to being instrumental in this roster's assembly. But with less oversight, Melnyk packed bags as he pleased. including that of the original co-founder, Cyril Leader. While the owner slashed heads in the boardroom, those in the locker room preached their desire for roster consistency. They spoke to the chemistry they'd built, chemistry that got them as far as they did and could go out the window with major changes. Granted, change proved especially inevitable as the NHL welcomed a new franchise. With the expansion draft set to shake things up, the Senators asked Dion Phaneuf to waive his no-move clause, but the veteran defenseman declined. Otto attempted to trade Phaneuf to a team on his list, but his bloated contract proved too much for potential partners. In the end, they left Marc Methot unprotected, who became the easy selection for Vegas. Losing Methot hurt, but they signed Johnny Oduya as a stopgap veteran while waiting for highly touted defensive prospect Thomas Chabot to step up. And despite missing their captain for the first 5 games, 2017-18 started well. Well enough that the Sens focused on present over future. Kyle Turris was on the final year of his contract. Off-season attempts at a new deal failed. So with unrestricted free agency looming, the Senators decided to get something for their 1C and top goal scorer from a year ago while they still could. Ottawa's huge deal sent Turris a future first and then some in order to land a new top center, Matt Duchene. But having watched Turris' situation play out, the immediate question became, would Ottawa retain any of their top talent? That question might have put the cart before the horse. And carts and horses really don't do well on ice. As the Senators returned from a trip to Sweden, they brought back a funk that sent them spiraling. From mid-November until the end of 2017, the team earned just 11 points in 21 games. On the plus side, at least no one came to those games to watch them lose. Sorry, I shouldn't be mean to Ottawa. That's what their owner was for. The day before the Senators hosted their Toronto rivals for an outdoor game that December, Melnyk stole headlines with what read as a threat to move the team, while also making it clear that fans were stuck with him. That quote's aimed at the same fan base that just a couple years earlier literally saved his life. But for Melnyk, attendance had become a focal point of his frustration. Numbers had steadily dropped, which became most notable when they couldn't even sell out their do-or-die Game 6 against the defending champs. While Melnyk's search for answers took a scorched earth approach, the reasons for lower attendance were fairly clear. First off, fans needed to travel for their home games. Melnyk knew this, even tried to remedy it, but struggled getting the approval for a new downtown location. Even had the arena been within downtown, Ottawa, being the nation's capital, was uniquely hit by lengthy issues within the pay system for government employees. Issues that forced workers to reduce certain expenses like hockey tickets. Add in the facts that the organization did nothing to engage with their francophone fans, or that the money supported an owner prone to saying some wild shit, and it made sense that sellouts became rare. One way to encourage sellouts: reduce the number of seats in the arena. Spoiler, that didn't work. With or without fans in the arena, the team floundered as the 2018 trade deadline approached. And after being buyers to start the year, 3 months later, the tune changed drastically. First to go, Phaneuf. The veteran defenseman headed to LA in a deal that Ottawa pulled off to free up cap space down the road for some impending big money contracts. Then, just a year and a half after trading for him, and giving up the young, speedy Mika Zibanejad to do so, Ottawa shipped Derek Brassard to Pittsburgh. Returning picks and prospects, this deal showcased the organization's new goal: a rebuild with such abruptness that even an anonymous player from last year's team pointed out just how fucked up the situation had become. Following Melnyk's lead, the players grew comfortable speaking their minds. Karlsson made it known that when he hit free agency, Ottawa wouldn't be getting a discount. Turris, the former Senator, gave some insight into the contract negotiations ahead of his trade, and how it was Melnyk who put the kibosh on the center getting paid. Even the fans made their voices heard. A GoFundMe campaign raised $10,000 to put up 4 anti-Melnyk billboards around Ottawa. Their feelings shocked no one. In just 10 months, the Senators went from a goal away from the Stanley Cup final to owning the league's second worst record. Chemistry continued to be the word of choice, but this time for the sake of assigning blame. As Dorian pointed out, though, this team fell short in enough ways where everyone was at fault. For such a drastic decline, this team still had not hit bottom. Heading into the 2018 offseason, everything felt uncertain, highlighted best by their captain's murky future. And that was even before we saw the bombs set to go off in the summer. In May, Senators assistant GM Randy Lee was charged with second-degree harassment against the driver of a hotel shuttle. To defend Lee, Melnyk brought in a lawyer with a list of previous clients who share questionable track records. As the story unraveled, the team eventually suspended Lee, and the assistant GM resigned later that summer. 2 weeks after that incident, news broke that Erik Karlsson's wife Melinda sought out court protection from the girlfriend of Senators forward Mike Hoffman. The allegations centered around harassment and cyberbullying, including pretty wild quotes wishing the worst towards the married couple, and an allegedly even more traumatic wish upon the Karlssons' unborn child. What the Karlssons tragically went through that March made the allegations even tougher to hear. That news forced Ottawa to quickly trade Hoffman. Despite the winger being one of their top 3 scorers of the last 3 seasons, Ottawa couldn't get much in return. They hoped it would help fix the deteriorating locker room. The players had been dealing with aspects of this out of the public eye for some time, and the locker room discord even prompted their goalie to want out. But once the team moved Hoffman, Anderson seemed ready to stay on. Although I have some bad news if he expected Ottawa to become drama-free. Just days after that trade, Ottawa made a head-scratching decision to keep their 4th overall pick in the 2018 draft. Thanks to the Duchesne deal, that guaranteed Colorado would receive Ottawa's first-round pick a year later. A pick that had a very realistic chance of turning into a prospect like Jack Hughes. While a draft lottery tumble would let this decision ultimately work out for Ottawa, their logic seemed to signal that they believed this team was closer to the one that made the conference finals than the one that finished second to last in the league. As the eventful summer of an eventful year began to wind down, Melnyk decided September was the perfect time to release a video where he attempted to borrow some goodwill by selecting Mark Borowiecki as his friend for the day. The hometown kid, who deserved much better than this, listened to the owner tell him where this team was at and where they were headed. The obvious soundbite came when Melnyk very delicately described the current situation.
Right now, we're kind of in the dumpster.
Melnyk talked about the importance of a strong locker room, again reminded everyone that he wasn't going anywhere, bounced between his belief in the presently assembled team, but also that they needed to add players. Maybe the biggest piece of information came from what went unsaid: the name of the Senators' captain. Based on the actions of the team and what Karlsson said himself, his future clearly laid elsewhere. 3 days after that video, Karlsson headed to San Jose. Dorian said what you'd expect a GM to say upon trading his captain, and the haul they got in return would seriously help with their expedited rebuild. But for a fan base that had already been through so much, this move obviously hit hard. Ottawa's attempts to get the locker room right, as well as get younger, conflicted to a point where beyond a select few, little veteran presence remained. Within a month of the 2018-2019 season, the team yet again made headlines for the wrong reasons. Video leaked from an Uber ride where multiple players talked shit about the team, mocked an assistant coach, and although the guys involved apologized to the team, no action was taken. No one was held accountable, as if that sort of thing was just part of the system. And for the second season in a row, the Senators quickly spiraled the drain. The team put out a statement in February reminding everyone that these woes weren't long-term. The team would go all in and become competitive again. But to do so, they stripped what little they had left at the trade deadline. Duchesne, a headliner both of the Uber incident and Ottawa's ill-timed trade a year ago, had his number called. Ryan Dzingel, a young winger but not young enough for the rebuild, soon followed. Then, one of the final major pieces of the franchise from their 2017 playoff run headed off. Ottawa drafted Mark Stone in 2010 and saw him develop into a perennial top-scoring threat for the team. And with his departure, Ottawa fully handed the offensive keys over to the youngsters. Because the hockey gods have an incredible sense of timing, 2 days after the Stone trade, a deal fell through that would have helped pave the way for a new arena in downtown Ottawa. Melnyk acted as though moving downtown could serve as a cure-all, but when your attempts to do so lead to even the mayor talking shit, you might want to change up your approach. As the Senators sat at the bottom of the league to begin March of 2019, they said an early goodbye to their head coach. While Boucher's time in Ottawa unfortunately played out in an eerily similar way to his time in Tampa, he had done pretty well considering the circumstances. Mark Crawford finished out the year, but wasn't brought back either. Moving on from coaches in the midst of a rebuild isn't unusual or shocking, but in classic Ottawa fashion, these moves still had a funk to them. Dorion fired Boucher just 4 days after he said that they'd wait until summer for any head coaching decisions. This piled onto an already long list of reasons not to trust what the franchise said. As the 2018-2019 season wrapped up, Ottawa officially hit the bottom. 2 very long years after their playoff run. The remaining veterans from 2017 lingered for a little bit. Bobby Ryan became a bright spot of 2019-2020, not for his play, but for his decision to seek help. He returned from treatment, was awarded the Bill Masterton Trophy, then hit free agency for the first time in his 13-year career. Craig Anderson stuck around for one more season before also moving on. Dorion stated Anderson's impact simply as the best goalie they'd ever had. For all the changes in Ottawa, their owner never wavered. He continued to offer his thoughts, often with such misplaced pride that they sounded as though a mission accomplished banner should have perpetually hung behind him. There's some truth to Melnyk's sentiment, though. Failing businesses often have to fully detach decisions from the humans involved. Within a rebuild, timing when to shift from present to future can be tough, and getting as close as Ottawa did made it even tougher to witness. But the franchise committed to rebuilding, and we'll have to wait to see if they timed it right. Either way, Melnyk won't know. The owner passed away in 2022, leaving behind a team with a young, talented core, as well as his own complicated legacy. In hindsight, the collapse of these Senators seemed inevitable regardless of success. The catalyst for their unraveling stood comfortably in plain view, often acting and speaking in ways that made it hard for anyone watching to root for him even having a chance at hoisting the Stanley Cup. But rooting against him meant rooting against this specific team in their magical run in 2017. One that caught the league by surprise and could have had a happy ending, at least for players and fans. Ottawa found themselves a goal away from reaching the final. They gutted the roster in record time, and just a few long years later, landed a brand new core that gives reason for hope. Primarily, hope that this time it can at least last a little longer. I'm never sure how much pep or excitement I should have doing a collapse end card just because they're always kind of a bummer, but I hope you enjoyed this one. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you soon.